So the weather's starting to warm here where I'm at, and the snow is starting to melt as well. Let's give you a little guide here today to pre-emergents, what they are, what they aren't, and how you can use them effectively in your lawn. So pre-emergents are a type of herbicide that you can use to control annual grassy weeds in your lawn. Typically, this would be something like crabgrass, foxtail, some of those types of weeds that you would be thinking of. Now, the thing that most people get confused right off the bat when they see a product that says it controls weeds in your lawn or prevents them is that they think this is going to prevent all types of weeds. So make sure you understand this is just for those annual grassy type of weeds. This is not going to prevent things like dandelions or clover or other types of broadleaf weeds in your lawn. Now, how these products work is that it actually creates a vapor barrier in the top couple inches of your soil. So as those plants hit that vapor barrier, the root system kind of stops at that point, and the plant doesn't mature any farther than that and dies off. So typically these weeds are going to germinate in the spring or the early summertime. So the reason that we have to figure out timing of these applications and when to apply to prevent those weeds is we want to make sure we get this product out before those weeds start to germinate. That way they can do exactly what they're supposed to do, and you'll have great results from these products. Now remember that these products can affect the existing root system of your grass just a little bit as well. So that's why it's important to have effective timing, use effective rates, and make sure that you look at the label and figure out exactly what you need to do in your situation. I have a couple of example videos I'll be mentioning here in a little while as well, so you can check out how to apply some of these different products. So as far as timing goes for one of these products, you want to make sure that you get them down between soil temperatures of 50 and 55 degrees. The reason for this is that those plants that you're wanting to try to prevent from growing germinate just after that point, somewhere around between 55 and 58 degrees. And not all of this is going to happen at the same time, so the timing of this is important, but if you happen to be watching this video later on and you're slightly over that timing, then realize that not every single plant of crabgrass or the weeds that you're trying to prevent are going to come up all at the same time. So if you're watching this a little later on and you're somewhere close to there, I would still definitely consider an application if you've had problems with crabgrass or other types of weeds like this in the past. Now, the temps in your soil should be 50 to 55 and also should be steady there and looking like they're going to rise. Now, I know that it's not going to be easy to predict what's going to be happening with the weather, but if you just happen to hit this for a day or so, but then it looks like there's a lot of cold temperatures coming after that, most likely your soil temperature is going to go back down. So be at that 50 to 55 degree range and looks like it's going to start to rise and things are going to warm up. Now, how can you figure out exactly what your soil temp is? Well, the first thing you could do is just get a cheap thermometer, a meat thermometer that you can go out, check a 2-inch depth here for your soil temperature and see where you're sitting at. And again, look at your weather forecasts to kind of figure out what the trends are going to be. The other thing you could do is look online at one of these tools that they have available. You can kind of check and see what general soil temperatures are in your area, how they might be kind of trending as well. Now, this isn't going to be quite as accurate as taking that thermometer out into your specific lawn, but if you're trying to get a good sense of it in a general broader area, you can check these online tools as well. They'll also give you some historical data in terms of what the temperatures have been like over a period of time, so that can give you an idea on when you might be looking at applying some of these products as well. Now, once your first application here is done at 50 to 55 degrees soil temperature, these products need to be watered in to start working. The way that it works is that it has to get worked into the soil and start to create that barrier. So if it's just sitting there, depending on what product you use, or if you spray it onto the lawn and it's just sitting there, it needs to get at least a ½ inch of water to actually activate down into the soil. So it's very important to remember, something that you need to do. Now, another thing that people ask about in the early season here is, can I go earlier than that 50 to 55 degree temperature? And the thing to remember here is that if the ground is kind of mushy after the snow melts or after it's been frozen for those of us up here in the north, it needs a little time to set up before you go applying these products, because when you apply that irrigation that it needs to get into the soil, if the soil is not able to take on that water, if it's already saturated, then you're not going to get the effectiveness out of this product that you need. So let it set up a little bit, let it dry out just a little, and then get your applications done. So again, if you're watching this later and you didn't get your ideal window of time done to apply this, then still consider maybe applying if you've had some issues with crabgrass, and maybe look at a product that contains the active ingredient dithiopyr. We're going to talk about products here quickly in a second. This one specifically has a little little bit of post-emergent control to it. Now, typically from what I've been told about this, I don't have a lot of experience with that product itself, but what I've been told about that is that it has to be done in a liquid form to be the most effective with a surfactant in order to control some of those early crabgrass plants that might have emerged that you're trying to take care of. So if you're using a granular product that has that ingredient, there might be some control, but if you want the absolute best way to do that, then make sure you go after a sprayable product if you missed your ideal window and you're going a little later on. Now, speaking of those products, there's 3 names that you're probably going to want to know: prodiamine, dithiopyr, and Scott's uses a product that you might see in a store with the active ingredient pendamethalin. So prodiamine is one that I've used myself, both in a granular form and in a sprayable form. So if you're looking for some of those, again, I do have a couple videos on both of those forms. If you would like to learn how to apply them, some more about the rates of the specific products that I was using, please check out those videos. My co-hosts for the Turfcast podcast and I are also going to be doing a deeper dive on pre-emergence, how to figure out the rates, how to do these applications as well. So that will be coming up, and once I have a link for that, I'll also include that down in the description if you'd like a deeper dive on how all these things work. But actual rates for the various products that you're going to find is beyond the scope of this video. Just know that those are the active ingredients that you might be looking for. Prodiamine is very typical. Again, dithiopyr would be one that you could use as well, but it doesn't have quite as long of a residual effect. So if you're looking for something that's going to last the longest in the soil, probably prodiamine is the one that you're going to look at. And if you're in the store, like I said, and you find a Scott's product, you're going to see the pendamethalin there. And from the studies that have been done, that product works fine as well, as long as you get the rates correct and your applications done correctly. Now, sometimes you'll find a fertilizer product as well that has pre-emergent in it. Usually you're going to find this at a store, so it will have some sort of fertilizer mixed in with the pre-emergent product. Now, this is fine maybe if you haven't done any fertilizing yet to your yard, if you're brand new to this, or last fall you didn't get anything down and then you might need a spring application. But for the most part, if you did a full fall program of fertilizer, then the timing of when these actual pre-emergents go down isn't really exactly when I'd like to push a bunch of growth in terms of the actual grass itself. So that's why I'm using some of these standalone products compared to using something with fertilizer mixed in. But just know that you might find those at the store. You can use those, but again, it would be a scenario for me personally where I would recommend only if you didn't do fertilizer in the fall, because you're just not going to need it coming out of the gate. It's already going to want to kind of come out of spring and really get going. Another thing related to pre-emergence that people often maybe overlook would be the fact that you cannot put down any seed if you've put down your pre-emergent. If you have some sort of seeding project you need to do in the spring, you have an area of damage or something that needs to be fixed, then do not put your pre-emergent down in that section, or it's going to prevent that seed from growing as well. So something very important there to make sure you take note of is just make sure that if you're doing any renovation projects, overseeding projects here in the spring, then you're not going to want to use that typical pre-emergent product, or you're not going to have the results that you want. Now, liquid versus granular is another thing that people often have questions about. I've used a couple different types of granular. There's a specific one that I feel has done a better job for me than anything else. And of course, there are these sprayable products. And for most people that are doing this that want the most effective thing out of it, they're probably going to want to look at spraying that. But if you're one of those people that doesn't have a sprayer, if you're not super comfortable with that yet when you're just beginning, then definitely I have had good results with granular, and the specific way that I applied it and what I used can be found in this video right here that I will link. Otherwise, you're going to get the best price usually out of the sprayable form. It's going to last you a very long time, or if you have a larger property as well, this is the way to go. There has been some research done on splitting your applications of pre-emergent, so instead of putting down one rate that's going to cover you for months and months, you split your rates into 2, and that way you get a little more control over the summertime. And from the research that has been done, that is a great way to do it. In terms of doing that split application, I have discussed that in some previous videos. I'll link those, but again, we'll be discussing this on our episode of the Turfcast podcast talking about pre-emergence. Lastly, I'll say a couple things about pre-emergence as well, is that you don't have to use these products forever. So a lot of people get into a routine in their lawn and they do the same things year after year. But for me, I've noticed that over time, especially as you start to get the population of these weeds down, then you may definitely come to a year where you feel like, last year I didn't really have any issues with this. I don't know that I really need to go ahead and apply this anymore. I've got a thick stand of turf. Everything is really healthy. And that's exactly where I got to. I haven't really applied any of these pre-emergent products to most of my yard now for years. Even if I do find a few pieces of crabgrass here and there, it's easily removed by hand early on, or you also have those post-emergent controls, which just means being able to target them by spraying them after the fact. So you don't need to blanket the whole ground with pre-emergent every single year for years on end if you're not really having issues with it anymore. Hope that covered the basic guide of pre-emergence today. There's so much to dive into on specific products and how to actually use those, but like I said, you can use the resources that I've done already in terms of videos. You can check out our podcast coming up, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.